He was just a janitor with a worn-out car and a son to raise. She was a millionaire CEO with an empire to command. And when she ordered his trash towed from her pristine parking lot, mocking him in front of her entire staff, no one expected what would happen 72 hours later. Not her investors, not her board, not even him. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about pride, desperation, and the moment when the person you humiliated becomes the only one who can save you. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The pre-dawn darkness of Harborside City held a particular kind of silence, the type that existed in the space between streetlights flickering off and alarm clocks beginning their chorus. Caleb Turner knew this silence intimately. He'd been greeting it every morning for the past 4 years, ever since the accident that took his wife and left him with a 6-year-old son and a mountain of medical bills that never seemed to shrink. His car, a 1998 Honda Civic with rust blooming along the wheel wells and a passenger door that didn't quite match the faded blue of the rest of the body, coughed to life in the apartment complex parking lot. The engine rattled like loose change in a tin can, but it ran. That was all that mattered. "Dad, the seatbelt stuck again," Ethan said from the back seat, his small fingers struggling with the buckle that had a mind of its own. Caleb reached back without looking, his hands finding the mechanism by memory alone, jiggling it just right until it clicked. "Got it, buddy. You good?" "Yeah." Ethan clutched his backpack against his chest, a drawing peeking out from the unzipped top. He'd been working on it for 3 days, a picture of their car with wings, flying over the city. "Dad, do you think Miss Patricia will like my airplane car?" "She's going to love it," Caleb said, glancing in the rearview mirror at his son's hopeful face. Patricia ran the before-school program at Brookstone Elementary, a warm-hearted woman who'd been accepting Ethan at 5:30 in the morning without complaint for 2 years. She was one of the good ones, the kind of person who made Caleb believe the world hadn't completely lost its way. They drove through empty streets, past closed storefronts and sleeping houses, the radio playing quietly, some old song about holding on. Caleb's janitorial shift at Apex Dynamics started at 6, and he needed to drop Ethan off by 5:45 to make it on time. The math of his life was calculated in minutes, every delay a potential disaster. "When I grow up," Ethan said suddenly, "I'm gonna buy you a car that doesn't make funny noises." Caleb smiled, though something twisted in his chest. "This car's been good to us. It gets us where we need to go. But the kids at school say it looks like a junk car." "Those kids," Caleb said, carefully, "don't know what they're talking about. This car might not be pretty, but it's paid for. No one can take it from us. That's worth more than shiny paint." Ethan considered this, then nodded with the simple acceptance that belonged to the young. "Okay." They pulled up to Brookstone Elementary, just as the sky began to lighten, the darkness shifting from black to deep blue. Patricia was already at the door, her cardigan wrapped tight against the morning chill, her smile genuine, as Ethan scrambled out. "Morning, Mr. Turner," she called. "Morning, Miss Patricia. Thank you again." "Nothing to thank me for. This one's my favorite early bird." She ruffled Ethan's hair. "What have you got there?" Ethan pulled out his drawing proudly. "It's our car, but it can fly." Patricia studied it with proper seriousness. "Now, that's the kind of innovation I like to see. Come on, let's get you some breakfast." Caleb watched them disappear inside, waiting until the door closed before pulling away. His son was safe, fed, cared for. That was the victory of each day. Apex Dynamics rose from the Harborside business district like a monument to ambition, all glass and steel and reflective surfaces that caught the sunrise and threw it back at the world. The building housed 300 employees, from software engineers to marketing executives, all working to keep the tech company at the cutting edge of cloud infrastructure solutions. Caleb didn't fully understand what that meant, but he understood his job well enough. Keep the floors clean, the trash emptied, and himself invisible. He parked in the far corner of the employee lot, in the section reserved for service staff and delivery drivers. where his Civic wouldn't stand out quite so badly among the other aging vehicles. The executive parking, closest to the entrance, gleamed with BMWs, Teslas, and Mercedes-Benzes, each one worth more than Caleb would make in 5 years. He pulled his uniform from the back seat, the navy blue shirt, with Apex Maintenance embroidered over the pocket, and headed for the service entrance. His badge beeped against the reader, and he slipped inside, immediately enveloped by the antiseptic smell of industrial cleaner and the hum of HVAC systems waking up for the day. The locker room was empty. Caleb changed quickly, laced up his work boots, and grabbed his supply cart from the storage closet. His route was the same every morning: start on the 5th floor executive suites, work his way down to the lobby, finish with the restrooms and break rooms. 4 hours of work before most people arrived, erasing the evidence of yesterday so everyone could pretend their world was perpetually fresh. He worked methodically, emptying trash bins, vacuuming conference rooms, wiping down the glass walls that separated offices. The executive floor always felt different from the rest of the building. Quieter, more austere, as if even the air was more refined up here. Photos of the leadership team lined one wall: the founder, the CTO, the head of operations, and at the center, larger than the others, Rianne Vaughn, Chief Executive Officer. Caleb had seen her exactly 3 times in person. She was the kind of woman who moved through spaces like she owned them, which technically she did. Tall, polished, her dark hair always perfectly styled, her suits tailored to exactness. She didn't make eye contact with maintenance staff. Most executives didn't. To them, people like Caleb were part of the building's infrastructure, as impersonal as the elevators. He finished the executive floor by 7:15 and made his way down. The building was starting to wake up now, early arrivers trickling in with their coffee and their purposeful strides. Caleb kept his head down, his cart moving smoothly across the polished floors, a ghost in navy blue. By 9:30, he was done. His shift complete, Caleb returned his cart, changed back into his street clothes, and headed for the parking lot. The morning sun was fully up now, bright and unforgiving, making the rust spots on his Civic look even worse than usual. He was fishing his keys from his pocket when he heard it. "Whose piece of junk is that?" The voice was sharp, cutting through the ambient noise of the parking lot like a blade. Caleb looked up. Rianne Vaughn stood 20 feet away, next to her silver Porsche Cayenne, staring directly at his car. She wasn't alone. 3 other executives clustered around her, all holding tablets and coffee cups, clearly in the middle of some outdoor meeting or walking discussion. They'd stopped, and now all 4 of them were looking at his Civic like it was a dead animal someone had left to rot. Caleb's stomach dropped. He said nothing, hoping if he stayed quiet, they'd move on. They didn't. Rianne Vaughn had not built a $75 million company by accepting mediocrity. She'd clawed her way up from a mid-level analyst position at a failing startup to CEO of one of the fastest-growing cloud infrastructure companies in the region through sheer force of will, strategic brilliance, and an absolute refusal to settle. Everything in her world had to meet a standard. Everything had to reflect excellence, which was why the rusted, mismatched, barely functional vehicle squatting in her employee parking lot felt like a personal insult. "I'm serious," she said, her voice carrying across the parking lot. "Whose car is that?" It looks like it was assembled from 3 different junkyards. The executives with her, Graham from operations, Simone from marketing, and Todd from finance, exchanged uncertain glances. They'd learned over the years that when Rianne was in a mood, the safest strategy was to agree and move on. "It's pretty rough," Graham offered diplomatically. "Rough?" Rianne walked closer to the Civic, her heels clicking on the asphalt. "This thing is a safety hazard. Look at that rust. And is that door a completely different color? How is this even street legal?" Caleb stood frozen by the driver's side door, keys clutched in his hand, hoping desperately that she wouldn't notice him. But the universe wasn't that kind. "Oh," Rianne said, her eyes landing on him for the first time. Recognition flickered, Not of him personally, but of his uniform, your maintenance. It wasn't a question. It was a categorization. Yes, ma'am, Caleb said quietly. She looked from him to the car and back again. This is yours? Yes, ma'am. A small, incredulous laugh escaped her. You drive this to work every day? Park it in our company lot where clients and investors can see it? Caleb's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. I park in the employee section, ma'am. Far corner, out of the way. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Out of the way. Rianne gestured broadly. It's an eyesore from every angle. This parking lot is part of our company's image. We have people touring our facilities constantly, venture capitalists, potential partners. And they're supposed to see this? Simone shifted uncomfortably. Rianne, maybe we should. Get this trash out of here, Rianne said, cutting her off. She pulled out her phone, already dialing. I'm calling campus security. This vehicle needs to be towed immediately. Wait, Caleb said, panic rising in his chest. Please, I need this car. I can't afford a tow fee, and I need it to pick up my son. That's not my problem, Rianne said, the phone already at her ear. You should have thought about that before bringing a junk heap onto company property. Yes, hi, this is Rianne Vaughn. I need a vehicle towed from the south employee lot immediately. It's a partly blue Honda Civic, license plate. She leaned forward, squinting. Whiskey Kilo 7942. Miss Vaughn, please. Caleb tried again, his voice cracking slightly. I'll park somewhere else. I'll find street parking. Just please don't tow it. The fees alone would. She held up one finger, silencing him while she finished her call. Yes, have them here within the hour. Bill it to the company. Thank you. She ended the call and finally looked at him directly. Mr. Turner. Caleb Turner. Mr. Turner. Let me be very clear. Apex Dynamics has a reputation to maintain. Every detail matters, from our technology to our facilities, to the impression we make on everyone who walks through that door or drives past this building. Your vehicle doesn't meet our standards. If you can't afford proper transportation, perhaps you should consider whether this is the right position for you. The other executives were staring at the ground now, at their phones, anywhere but at Caleb's face. I've worked here for 4 years, Caleb said, something harder entering his voice, despite his best efforts to stay deferential. I've never been late, never missed a shift. I do my job well. I'm sure you do, Rianne said dismissively. But this isn't about your job performance. This is about standards, image, things you clearly don't understand. A small crowd had gathered now. Other employees arriving. For work, some pretending not to watch while absolutely watching. Caleb could feel their eyes on him, could imagine what they were thinking. The poor janitor getting dressed down by the CEO. Entertainment before their morning meetings. The tow truck will be here soon. Rianne continued, already turning away. I suggest you make arrangements. Security will have information about the impound lot. Graham, let's continue this discussion inside. We have the investor call at 10. She walked away without a second glance, her entourage following like ducklings, leaving Caleb standing alone next to his car, his hands shaking, his face burning with humiliation. Someone in the gathered crowd whispered, just loud enough to carry. That was brutal. Another voice. She's not wrong though. That car is pretty rough. Caleb climbed into his Civic before anyone could say anything else to him. He sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady his breathing. The car that had faithfully carried him and his son through 4 years of survival, that had never asked for anything but gas and occasional duct tape, was about to be towed like garbage. He had $47 in his checking account. The tow fee would be at least $200, plus daily storage at the impound lot. Even if he could scrape together the money, it would mean no groceries this week. It would mean telling Ethan They couldn't afford his school field trip next month. It would mean falling further behind on the electric bill that was already overdue. Through the windshield, Caleb watched Rianne Vaughn disappear into the building, her posture perfect, her world uncomplicated by things like rust and mismatched doors and the impossible mathematics of poverty. He started the engine, that familiar rattle now sounding like a death knell, and pulled out of the parking lot before the tow truck could arrive. He'd park on the street blocks away and walk the rest of the way for his afternoon shift. He'd figure something out. He always did. But as he drove away, something unfamiliar burned in his chest alongside the humiliation. Not quite anger, not quite resentment. Something quieter but more dangerous. The feeling of being seen, finally, but in the worst possible way. What Caleb didn't know, what no one in that parking lot knew, was that 72 hours from now, Rianne Vaughn would be standing in a very different position, desperate, powerless, and the only person who could help her would be the man whose car she'd just called trash. Rianne Vaughn's corner office occupied the entire northeast section of the 5th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of harborside skyline and the bay beyond. The space was a study in controlled minimalism, a glass desk with a single laptop and a geometric pen holder, 2 white leather chairs for visitors, and 1 piece of art on the wall, an abstract painting in shades of gray and silver that had cost more than most people's cars. She liked it this way, clean, uncluttered, no distractions from the work that consumed 14 hours of every day. By 11 that morning, she'd already forgotten about the janitor and his pathetic vehicle. The tow truck had come and gone according to the security report she'd skimmed. The parking lot was clear. Standards maintained. She'd moved on to actual business, the quarterly review, the pending acquisition of a smaller competitor, and the persistent problem of their data center's cooling efficiency. Her assistant, Monica, appeared in the doorway. "Your mother's on line 2. Rianne's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Tell her I'm in a meeting. I tried that yesterday and the day before," she said, and I'm quoting, "I know she's not in a meeting because I can track her calendar. So put her on the damn phone." Despite everything, Rianne felt the corner of her mouth twitch. Her mother had helped build the original version of this company back when it was just 3 people in a rented office space, before Rianne had taken it over and transformed it into what it was today. Claire Vaughn didn't intimidate easily, and she definitely didn't accept being managed by her own daughter. "Fine." Rianne picked up the phone, pressing the button for line 2. "Hi, Mom." "Don't hi Mom me like you didn't ignore my last 6 calls. I've been busy." "You're always busy. That's not an excuse. It's a lifestyle choice, and not a healthy one." Her mother's voice softened slightly. "How are you really?" "I'm fine. Revenue's up 18% quarter over quarter. The new AI integration is exceeding projections. Everything's on track." A long pause. "I didn't ask about the company. I asked about you." Rianne looked out at the skyline, at the glittering towers of glass and steel, monuments to ambition and success. "They're the same thing." "No, honey, they're not. And that's exactly what I'm worried about." Another pause, then, "Have you eaten today?" "I had coffee." "That's not food. It's liquid calories." Rianne Elizabeth Vaughn. All right. I'll grab something at lunch. An actual lunch, not a protein bar you eat while typing." Rianne smiled despite herself. "Deal." "Was there something specific you needed?" Her mother's tone shifted, became more careful. "I saw the security footage." Rianne's smile faded. "What security footage?" "The parking lot incident this morning. Graham sent it to me. Said I should know what's happening at my own company." "Your company?" "I'm pretty sure I bought you out 3 years ago." "You bought my shares. You didn't buy my right to care." Her mother's voice hardened. "What were you thinking, treating that man like that? In public? In front of half the staff?" Rianne sat up straighter. "I was maintaining standards. That vehicle was unacceptable in our parking lot. That vehicle was his transportation, his livelihood. And you humiliated him because it wasn't pretty enough for you. It wasn't about pretty, it was about image, standards, excellence. Yes, I know your speech by heart, Rianne. I helped you build this company on those principles. But somewhere along the way, you forgot the other principles, the ones about dignity and compassion and remembering where we came from. Where we came from? Rianne laughed, but there was no humor in it. We came from a one-bedroom apartment, where I slept on the couch while you worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I remember exactly where we came from. That's why I refuse to go back. And you think that man with the old car, the one working janitorial shifts while raising a kid, you don't think he's trying to do the same thing? You don't see yourself in him at all? The words hit harder than Rianne wanted to admit. She stood, pacing to the window. That's different. How? I worked my way up. I earned this. And you think he's not working? Not earning? Rianne, pride and cruelty are not the same as standards. What you did this morning was cruel. Rianne pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Outside, the city sprawled in all directions, millions of people fighting their own battles, climbing their own mountains. She'd worked so hard to reach the summit that she'd forgotten what the climb looked like from the bottom. I should go, she said quietly. The investor call can wait 5 minutes. Listen to me. Your father, may he rest in peace. He taught me something important before he died. He said the true measure of success isn't how high you climb, it's how many hands you reach down to pull up with you. Rianne closed her eyes. Her father had been a mechanic, a man who could fix anything with an engine but who died at 49 from a heart attack, worn out from too many hours and too little rest. She'd been 17. It was his death that had lit the fire in her, the desperate need to never be vulnerable, never be poor, never be at the mercy of circumstances again. I hear you, Mom, she said finally. Do you? Because I'm not sure. That man this morning, he wasn't your enemy. He was just trying to survive. Like we did. Like everyone does. They talked for a few more minutes, the conversation drifting to safer topics, her mother's garden, the book club she'd joined, the neighbors she was feuding with over a property line. When they finally hung up, Rianne stood at the window for a long time, staring out at nothing. She pulled up the security footage on her computer, watched herself walk up to that beaten Honda, watched the way the janitor, Caleb Turner, had stood there, keys in hand, his body language screaming defeat, watched herself make the call, dismiss his protests, walk away without a second thought. She looked like her father's bosses. The men who'd underpaid him, overworked him, treated him as disposable. The men she'd sworn never to become. Rianne closed the video and sat in the silence of her perfect office, surrounded by the evidence of her success, and for the first time in a very long time, felt something uncomfortably close to shame. What she didn't know yet, what no one could have predicted, was that in exactly 63 hours, every certainty in her carefully constructed world would collapse, and the only person standing in the rubble with the knowledge to rebuild it would be Caleb Turner, the man whose car she'd called trash, the man she was about to desperately need. 72 hours after the parking lot incident, at precisely 2:47 in the morning, the entire infrastructure of Apex Dynamics came crashing down. Rianne's phone erupted on her nightstand, the emergency ringtone she'd assigned to the company's crisis line cutting through the silence of her downtown penthouse. She was awake instantly. Years of high-stakes business training her body to shift from sleep to full alertness in seconds. Vaughn. She answered, already swinging her legs out of bed. Rianne, it's Graham. His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. We have a catastrophic situation. The entire data center is offline. All of it. Every server, every backup system, everything. She was already moving, pulling on clothes with the phone pressed between her ear and shoulder. What do you mean everything? The redundancies should have kicked in. They didn't. That's the problem. Something triggered a cascade failure across all systems simultaneously. Our clients are completely dark. We're talking about 42 major companies with zero access to their cloud infrastructure. Healthcare systems, financial institutions, logistics companies. Everything they have stored with us is inaccessible. Rianne's blood went cold. This wasn't just a technical glitch. This was an extinction-level event for the company. How long have we been down? 17 minutes. Get everyone to the office. I don't care if they're sleeping, eating, or getting married. Everyone. Now. I'll be there in 15 minutes. She made it in 12, her Porsche tearing through empty streets, running 2 red lights she'd gladly pay tickets for later. The Apex Dynamics building blazed with light, every floor illuminated like a beacon of crisis. Cars filled the parking lot, including vehicles she recognized as belonging to engineers, system administrators, and senior leadership. The data center occupied the entire basement level, a temperature-controlled fortress of servers and networking equipment that represented the physical heart of everything Apex did. When Rianne burst through the doors, she found organized chaos. Clustered around workstations, screens filled with error messages, and diagnostic readouts, the air thick with tension and the smell of too many bodies in too small a space. Graham appeared at her elbow immediately. Status update. We've been down 29 minutes now. The system initiated what looks like a complete lockdown. Every security protocol engaged simultaneously, including ones that shouldn't even be active. It's like the entire infrastructure decided we were under attack and sealed itself off. Was it an attack? Rianne demanded. We don't know. There's no evidence of external intrusion, no malware, no breach. But something triggered the emergency protocols, and now we can't reverse them. Todd, from finance, looked gray. Every minute we're down costs us approximately $8,000 in service-level agreement violations. We're at $250,000 and counting. By morning, we'll be facing lawsuits from every major client we have. Rianne pushed past him to the main terminal where their lead systems architect, a brilliant woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, was typing furiously. Sarah, talk to me. It's the Omega Protocol, Sarah said without looking up. Someone or something activated it 3 hours ago with a delayed trigger. It's a legacy security measure from the original system architecture, before my time, designed to completely seal the data center in case of catastrophic breach. But it was supposed to have been decommissioned years ago. Can you override it? That's the problem. The override requires physical access to the primary authentication server, which is locked behind a biometric security door that only recognizes 3 people's credentials. She finally looked up, her face pale. The founder who installed it, who died 6 years ago. Your mother, who hasn't been in this building in 3 years. And the facilities manager who set up the system, Marcus Fletcher, who retired 14 months ago and moved to Costa Rica. Rianne felt the floor tilt beneath her. There has to be another way. There is, Sarah said slowly. The system has a manual emergency access panel. It was required by city code. A physical failsafe in case of fire or disaster. It's hidden behind a maintenance panel in the sub-basement. But here's the thing. The documentation for its exact location was lost in a filing system purged 3 years ago. The only people who knew where it was were Marcus Fletcher and the maintenance staff who worked here when it was installed. So call them, Rianne snapped. We tried. Marcus isn't answering his phone, probably asleep in whatever beach town he's living in. The other maintenance workers from that era are all gone. Retired, moved on, one passed away. Sarah pulled up a personnel file on her screen. Except one, Caleb Turner. He's been here since the year the system was installed. If anyone knows where that access panel is, it's him. The name hit Rianne like a physical blow. Caleb Turner, the janitor. The man whose car she'd called trash 72 hours ago. The man she'd humiliated in front of half the company. You're telling me, Rianne said slowly, that our entire company's survival depends on a janitor? Not just any janitor, Graham said quietly. The janitor you had towed and publicly humiliated 3 days ago. The room had gone silent, everyone suddenly very interested in their keyboards and screens, They'd all heard about the parking lot incident. In a company of 300 people, gossip traveled faster than their gigabit network connections. Rianne's mind raced through calculations: pride versus survival, ego versus $8,000 per minute in losses, her personal embarrassment versus the livelihoods of 300 employees in 42 client companies. It wasn't even close. "Where is he?" she asked. Graham checked his watch. "His shift doesn't start until 6 a.m. He's probably at home. Get me his address." "Rianne," Graham said carefully. "Maybe someone else should go, given the history." "No." She was already moving toward the door. "This is my mess. I'll clean it up. Get me that address now." 5 minutes later, she was back in her Porsche with an address in the Riverside Heights neighborhood, a part of the city she rarely visited, where apartment buildings sagged with age and chain-link fences marked property lines. The drive took 18 minutes, each one feeling like an hour as she watched the company's losses tick upward in her mind. The apartment complex where Caleb lived was a 3-story brick building with external stairs and narrow balconies cluttered with bikes and plants, and the accumulated debris of lives lived in 2 small spaces. Rianne parked under a flickering streetlight and stared up at apartment 2C, where a single light burned in the window. 3:45 in the morning. She was about to wake up a man she'd humiliated, had probably cost hundreds of dollars in tow fees, and beg him for help. The irony wasn't lost on her. Neither was the justice of it. Rianne climbed the exterior stairs, her heels clicking on metal grating, and stood before the door of apartment 2C. She could hear a television playing softly inside, some late-night program, and beneath it, the sound of movement. She knocked. 3 sharp raps that sounded too loud in the pre-dawn quiet. The movement inside stopped. A long pause, then footsteps approaching. A shadow blocked the peephole. The door opened 6 inches, chain lock still engaged. Caleb Turner stood on the other side, wearing sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, his hair disheveled, his eyes sharp despite the hour. When he saw who it was, his expression didn't change, but something hardened in his gaze. "Miss Vaughn," he said flatly, "it's almost 4 in the morning." "I know." Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. "I need your help." He stared at her for a long moment, and she could see him processing this. The woman who'd called his car trash now, standing on his doorstep in the middle of the night. "With what?" he asked finally. "The company is down. Everything. We need access to an emergency override panel in the sub-basement, and you're the only person who knows where it is. And if I don't help you?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Rianne thought about lying, about softening it, but something in his gaze demanded honesty. "Then Apex Dynamics will probably cease to exist by Monday morning. 300 people will lose their jobs. 42 companies will lose access to their critical data, and I'll lose everything I've built." Caleb was quiet for so long she thought he might just close the door in her face. And honestly, she wouldn't blame him. Then he said, "Let me get my shoes." The drive back to Apex Dynamics was conducted in absolute silence. Rianne kept her eyes on the road, hyper-aware of Caleb sitting in the passenger seat of her Porsche, his presence filling the space in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. He'd thrown on jeans and a hoodie, grabbed his work badge, and followed her down the stairs without another word. No questions. No conditions. Just silent cooperation that somehow felt more damning than if he'd refused outright. She wanted to apologize. The words sat in her throat like stones, but every time she opened her mouth to speak, they refused to come out. What did you say to someone you'd publicly humiliated when you were now depending on them for your company's survival? "I'm sorry," felt insultingly inadequate, so she said nothing, and the silence stretched between them like a chasm. They pulled into the Apex parking lot at 417. Caleb's eyes went immediately to the far corner where he usually parked, the spot now occupied by someone else's vehicle. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he said nothing. Inside, The data center was even more chaotic than when she'd left. Sarah looked up as they entered, her expression shifting from desperation to hope when she saw Caleb. "Thank God," she breathed. "Caleb, we need to find the emergency access panel. It should be somewhere in the sub-basement, behind a maintenance panel, but we don't have documentation." "I know where it is," Caleb said quietly. The room went still. 20 pairs of eyes turned to him. "You do?" Graham asked. "I helped Marcus install the cover panel back in my second year. It's behind the water heater, in mechanical room B3. There's a false panel that looks like part of the wall, but it's actually on magnetic catches. I check it every 6 months, as part of the deep cleaning protocol. Make sure nothing's blocking it." Sarah grabbed a tablet. "Can you show us?" "Better if I just do it," Caleb said. "The catches are tricky. You have to press 3 specific points simultaneously, or the whole panel comes off crooked." He was already moving toward the sub-basement access stairs, and the group followed like a current, Rianne included. They descended 2 levels below the main data center into the mechanical spaces where the building's guts lived. Massive HVAC units, electrical panels, water systems, and the thrumming machinery that kept everything running. Mechanical room B3 was exactly as unglamorous as it sounded. A concrete box filled with pipes and an industrial water heater the size of a small car. Caleb moved through the space with the confidence of someone who'd navigated it hundreds of times in the dark. He went straight to what looked like a solid concrete wall behind the water heater, ran his fingers along 3 seemingly random points, and pressed. There was a soft click, and a section of wall swung outward, revealing a small alcove with a metal panel covered in warning labels and a biometric scanner. "There," Caleb said, stepping back. Sarah pushed forward immediately, pulling out her tablet and connecting it to the panel's diagnostic port. Her fingers flew across the screen, running protocols, bypassing security layers, initiating manual overrides. The minutes ticked by, each one costing the company thousands of dollars. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was actually 7 minutes, the panel beeped. A green light appeared. Somewhere above them, a deep mechanical hum vibrated through the walls as systems began to wake. "We're online," someone shouted from the stairs, their voice echoing down. "Systems are initializing. We're coming back up." A cheer erupted. People were hugging, high-fiving, the tension breaking like a fever. Sarah sagged against the wall, nearly crying with relief. Graham was already on his phone, calling clients, damage control mode fully engaged. In the chaos of celebration, Rianne and Caleb stood apart, the only 2 people not celebrating. He turned to leave, clearly considering his job done. "Wait," Rianne said. He stopped but didn't turn around. "I need to say something." "You don't owe me anything, Miss Vaughn. I did my job, that's all." "It's not all," she said quietly. The room was starting to empty, people rushing back upstairs to manage the recovery. But Rianne didn't move. "What I did in that parking lot, what I said about your car, about you, that was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong." Caleb finally turned. His face was unreadable. "Okay. That's it? Just okay? What do you want me to say?" There was no anger in his voice, which somehow made it worse. Just a flat, tired resignation. "You think I don't know what people like you think of people like me? I see it every day. The way executives look right through janitors, delivery drivers, security guards, like we're furniture." You just said it out loud. "That's the only difference." The words landed like punches. "That's not fair, isn't it?" Now there was something in his voice, not quite anger but close. "You called my car trash. Do you know what that car represents? That's 4 years of showing up when I wanted to disappear. That's every time I chose to keep going for my son instead of giving up. That's my wife's last gift to me before she died, because she made me promise I'd keep it running until Ethan graduated high school." Rianne felt something crack in her chest. "I didn't. No. You didn't ask. You didn't care. You just saw something that didn't meet your standards and decided it needed to be eliminated. He took a breath, steadying himself. I'm not telling you this for pity. I'm telling you because you asked why I'm not celebrating your relief. Because to you, this was a crisis you survived. To me, it was just Tuesday night. Another time someone with power decided I wasn't good enough. The sub-basement was empty now, except for the two of them and the distant hum of machinery. Rianne had never felt smaller while standing at full height. You're right, she said. About all of it. And I can't take back what I said, or how I made you feel. But I can tell you this, I was wrong. Not just about the car, but about the whole thing. My mother called me out on it the same day. Told me I'd become the kind of person my father spent his life working for. The kind who treated people as disposable. Caleb's expression shifted slightly. Your father? He was a mechanic. Worked himself to death at 49 because his bosses valued profit over people. She met his eyes. I spent my whole life trying not to be like the people who killed him. And then I became exactly that. So yes, you're right. I was cruel. And I'm sorry doesn't cover it, but it's all I have. The silence that followed was different than the one in the car. Not empty, but full, weighted with things unspoken. Finally, Caleb said, my wife, Sarah. Not the engineer upstairs, different Sarah. She used to say that people show you who they are, in how they treat people who can't do anything for them. She'd be disappointed in me right now. Why? Because I'm standing here enjoying your discomfort instead of accepting your apology with grace. He managed a tired smile. She was better than me in most ways. Kept me honest. How long has she been gone? 4 years. Car accident on the way home from her night shift. Drunk driver ran a red light. He looked away. Ethan was 2. Doesn't remember her except through pictures and the stories I tell. Rianne thought about her own father. About how memories faded at the edges like old photographs. How you could lose someone's voice, their laugh, the specific way they made you feel safe. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. He pushed his hands into his hoodie pockets. Look, I need to get home. Ethan wakes up at 5:30, and he panics if I'm not there. Of course, I'll drive you. I can call a ride, share. Caleb. She waited until he looked at her. Please, let me at least do that much. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. They walked back through the building together, past the celebrating engineers and the gradually stabilizing systems. At her car, Caleb paused before getting in. For what it's worth, he said, I hope you figure out who you want to be. Because the person who built a company that employs 300 people, that's not the same person who mocked a stranger's car. And you can't be both forever. Eventually, you have to choose. He climbed into the passenger seat, and Rianne stood there for a moment in the parking lot, in the space where everything had started to unravel 72 hours ago, and realized that Caleb Turner had just given her something more valuable than saving her company. He'd given her the truth. The drive back to Caleb's apartment took longer than it should have. Not because of traffic. At 4:45 in the morning, the streets were nearly empty, but because halfway there, Rianne pulled into the parking lot of an all-night diner and turned off the engine. What are we doing? Caleb asked. I don't know, she admitted. I just felt like I shouldn't take you home yet. Like there's something unfinished. He looked at her for a long moment. Then at the diner with its flickering neon sign that read Stella's, open 24/7. Since 1987. A tired smile crossed his face. Sarah loved this place. Terrible coffee. But the pancakes were amazing. Your wife? He nodded. She worked night shifts at St. Catherine's Hospital, pediatric nursing. This was her spot for breakfast before heading home. I brought Ethan here on the anniversary of her death last year. He ordered chocolate chip pancakes, and when they came, he cried because he said they tasted like a hug. Rianne felt her throat tighten. That's beautiful. It's also heartbreaking. He was 5. He shouldn't have memories that hurt that much. They sat in the idling car, neither moving to get out, neither suggesting they leave. Can I ask you something? Rianne said finally. Depends on the question. Why did you help me tonight? After everything I did, you could have let the company burn. Let me fail. Instead, you came without hesitation. Caleb was quiet for a long time, staring through the windshield at the diner's windows where a lone waitress wiped down tables. Because Ethan was watching, he said finally. Not literally, he was asleep. But I knew in the morning I'd have to look at him and know what kind of man I'd been in the middle of the night. And I didn't want to be the kind of man who lets 300 people lose their jobs because his pride got hurt. That's remarkably evolved. It's remarkably exhausting. He corrected. Being the bigger person all the time is just another name for swallowing your anger until it becomes part of your DNA. But I do it anyway, because someone has to show Ethan that you can be hurt and still choose kindness. That you can be knocked down and still help people up. Your wife taught you that? My wife lived that. I'm just trying not to forget the lesson. He turned to look at her. Why did you really pull over here? This isn't about the company anymore. Rianne gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Because I looked at you tonight, and I saw my father. Not physically, but the way you carry yourself. The quiet dignity of someone who does hard work without expecting recognition. And I realized that I've spent 15 years building a company in his memory, while completely betraying everything he stood for. That's heavy for 4 in the morning. It's heavy for any time. She finally released the wheel, her hands falling to her lap. My father's name was Robert. He worked at Patterson's Auto Service for 23 years. Never owned the place, never got promoted past lead mechanic. But he knew every customer by name. Remembered what their kids were studying in school, whether their grandmother's hip surgery went well, all of it. People trusted him. Sounds like a good man. He was the best man, and his bosses worked him to death. Literally. 70-hour weeks, constant pressure, no benefits worth mentioning. When he had his heart attack, he was alone in the garage at 8 p.m., trying to finish a rush job they'd promised a customer. The owner came in the next morning, found him, and the first thing he said, according to the police report, was that he hoped my father had finished the transmission rebuild. Caleb's expression darkened. Jesus. I was 22, in graduate school, studying business administration. I came home for the funeral, listened to his bosses give speeches about what a reliable worker he'd been, and I swore that I'd build something different. A company that valued people, that treated employees like human beings, not resources to be extracted and discarded. And instead, you became them. The words should have hurt, but they didn't. They just felt true. Yeah. Somewhere between the mission statement and the profit margins, I forgot why I started. I got so focused on success, on never being vulnerable, never being poor, never being powerless like my father was, that I became the person wielding the power without mercy. They sat in silence, the engine ticking as it cooled, the early morning pressing against the windows. You want to know the worst part? Rianne said. When I called for your car to be towed, I felt justified. Righteous, even. Like I was maintaining standards. It wasn't until my mother called me, until I watched that security footage, that I realized I'd been looking at your car the way my father's bosses looked at him, as something that didn't measure up, something disposable. But you're here now, Caleb said. That counts for something. Does it? Or am I just here because the universe forced me to confront it? If the systems hadn't crashed, if I hadn't needed you, would I ever have apologized? I don't know, would you? Rianne thought about that. Really thought about it. I want to say yes, but honestly, I'm not sure. And that terrifies me. Caleb opened the car door. Come on. Where? Inside. If we're going to have an existential crisis, we might as well have pancakes with it. Despite everything, Rianne laughed. She followed him into Stella's diner, where the waitress, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a name tag that read, Dorothy, greeted Caleb like family. Caleb Turner, as I live and breathe. Haven't seen you since last March. How's your boy? He's good, Dorothy. Growing like a weed. They do that. Makes you old fast. Dorothy grabbed 2 menus. Your usual table? They slid into a booth by the window. The vinyl seats cracked but clean. The tables slightly uneven but sturdy. Dorothy brought coffee without asking. The terrible coffee Caleb had mentioned. Bitter and burned but somehow perfect for 5 in the morning. So, Caleb said, dumping 3 sugars into his cup, since we're apparently having breakthrough therapy at a diner, let me ask you something. What do you actually want? Not the company goals, not the quarterly targets. What does Rianne Vaughn want when she's not being a CEO? The question caught her off guard. I don't know. Then that's your problem right there. You can't be a good leader if you don't know who you are when you're not leading. That's very philosophical. That's very stolen from my wife's therapist, who she made me see after Ethan was born and I was having panic attacks about being a father. He smiled at the memory. Sarah dragged me to 6 sessions. I hated every minute, but the therapist said something that stuck. You can't pour from an empty cup. If you don't know what fills you up, you'll just keep demanding everyone else stay thirsty so you don't have to face your own emptiness. Rianne stared into her terrible coffee. I'm empty, she said quietly. I have a penthouse I barely live in, a company that consumes my life, and a mother I avoid calling because she asks questions I don't want to answer. I'm 40 years old, and I can't remember the last time I did something just because it made me happy. So start small. What made you happy as a kid? Reading. I used to hide in the library for hours, just getting lost in other people's stories. When's the last time you read something that wasn't a business report? She actually had to think about it. 3 years ago. Maybe 4. There's your homework then. Buy a book. Not a business book. A story. Read it. In the middle of the day just because you can. Start filling the cup. Dorothy returned with plates of pancakes, chocolate chip for Caleb, blueberry for Rianne. Both stacks absurdly tall. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that didn't need filling, the kind that existed between people who'd unexpectedly found common ground. Thank you, Rianne said eventually, for helping tonight, for not slamming the door in my face, for this. Thank you for apologizing. Even if it took a crisis to get there, it still counts. He pointed his fork at her. But don't think this means we're friends. You've got a lot of work to do before you earn that. Fair enough. What would earning it look like? Caleb considered this. Start by fixing your parking lot policy. Let people park whatever gets them to work. Then, maybe look at your maintenance staff's wages. We haven't had a raise in 3 years, and the cost of living sure hasn't stayed flat. Then maybe just try walking through that building and looking people in the eye. Janitors, security guards, cafeteria workers. Learn their names. Remember them. I can do that. We'll see. They finished their pancakes as the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. By the time Rianne dropped Caleb at his apartment, it was 6:15, and the world was waking up. Ethan will be up any minute, Caleb said, opening the door. Thanks for the ride. And the pancakes. Thank you for saving my company. And for being honest. He paused halfway out. Hey, Miss Vaughn. Rianne. Please. Rianne. That person you're afraid you've become. The one who looks like your father's bosses. That person isn't permanent. You can choose different. Every single day. You can choose different. That's the gift of still being alive. Don't waste it. He closed the door and headed up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, rushing toward his son and the beginning of another day. Rianne sat in her car for a long time, watching the sun climb higher, thinking about choices and cups, and the terrifying freedom of knowing you could still change. Then she pulled out her phone and called her mother. Mom, it's me. Can we have lunch today? I need to tell you about something. 3 weeks after the data center crisis, Rhiannon Vaughn did something she hadn't done in 7 years. She left the office at 3 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. Her assistant Monica nearly fell out of her chair when Rhiannon announced she was taking a personal half-day. The board meeting scheduled for 4 was rescheduled. The investor calls were delegated, and for the first time since founding Apex Dynamics, Rhiannon walked out of that glass tower while the sun was still high in the sky, feeling equal parts liberated and terrified. She'd been thinking about Caleb's words constantly. Start small. Fill the cup. Choose different. So she'd started with the parking lot policy. The new memo went out company-wide. All employees could park any legal vehicle in the employee lot without restriction. No more aesthetic requirements, no more judgment, just functional transportation, respected equally. Then came the wage review. She discovered that maintenance staff, security, and cafeteria workers hadn't received raises in 3 years despite the company's explosive growth. That was corrected immediately, along with improved health benefits and the creation of an emergency assistance fund for employees facing unexpected hardships. But those were easy fixes, corporate decisions she could make from behind a desk. What was harder, what required actual courage, was what she was doing right now, walking into Brookstone Elementary at 3:15 to meet Caleb and his son. The school sat in a neighborhood that straddled the line between working class and struggling, where the playground equipment showed its age, but was well maintained by parents who cared enough to volunteer their weekends. Rhiannon found Caleb waiting by the front entrance, wearing his maintenance uniform, clearly on his afternoon break. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely surprised. "I said I would. People say a lot of things." Before she could respond, the school doors burst open, and kids poured out like a dam breaking. All noise and motion and boundless energy. Among them, a small boy with Caleb's eyes and a backpack nearly as big as he was ran straight for them. "Dad!" Ethan collided with Caleb's legs, wrapping his arms around them. Then he noticed Rhiannon and went shy, half hiding behind his father. "Ethan, this is Miss Vaughn. She's my boss at work." "Miss Vaughn, this is Ethan. Just Rhiannon is fine," she said, crouching down to his level. "Your dad tells me you're quite the artist." Ethan peeked out, curious. "You know about my drawings? I've heard you're pretty amazing." "I actually can't draw at all. Stick figures are about my limit." This seemed to relax him. "That's okay. My teacher says everyone's good at different things." "What are you good at?" "Numbers, mostly. And organizing things. Very boring compared to art." "Numbers aren't boring," Ethan said seriously. "They're like puzzles. Dad says you need numbers to make sure everyone gets paid." Caleb smiled. "I might have simplified the concept of corporate finance a bit." They walked together toward the small park adjacent to the school, where Ethan immediately made a beeline for the swings. Rhiannon and Caleb sat on a nearby bench, watching him pump his legs to gain height, his laughter carrying on the afternoon breeze. "He seems happy," Rhiannon observed. "He is, mostly. He has hard days, especially around Sarah's birthday and their anniversary. But he's resilient. Kids are like that. They bend instead of breaking, if you give them the support to spring back. You're doing a good job with him. I'm doing my best. Some days that's enough. Some days it isn't." He glanced at her. "So what made you actually take me up on the invitation?" "When I mentioned it last week, I figured you'd be too busy." "I was planning to be too busy. Then I realized that being too busy was just another excuse to avoid things that scared me." "Meeting a 6-year-old scares you?" "Meeting the life I could have had if I'd made different choices scares me. Seeing what normal looks like when I've spent 15 years convinced that normal was the enemy of success." Ethan came running over, breathless and grinning. "Dad, can I show Rhiannon my notebook?" "If she wants to see it." Ethan looked at her hopefully. Rhiannon nodded, and he pulled a battered spiral notebook from his backpack, the cover decorated with stickers of dinosaurs and rockets. Inside were dozens of drawings, elaborate scenes of cities and vehicles, people and animals, all rendered with the earnest skill of someone who saw the world in vivid detail. "This is incredible," Rianne said, genuinely awed. "Ethan, you have real talent. This one's my favorite." He pointed to a drawing of a man and a boy standing in front of a house with a big yard. "That's me and Dad in our future home. See, it has a garage where Dad can fix things, and a tree with a swing, and a dog. Dad says maybe we can get a dog someday. Someday when we have a yard," Caleb qualified. "Hard to have a dog in a second-floor apartment." "Do you have a dog?" Ethan asked Rianne. "No, I don't have any pets." "Why not?" "I guess I never thought I had time for one." Ethan considered this seriously. "That's sad. Everyone should have something to take care of. It makes you less lonely." The simple wisdom of it hit Rianne harder than any business insight she'd ever received. "You're absolutely right." Over the next hour, they existed in a bubble of normalcy that Rianne had forgotten could exist. Ethan showed her how to pump higher on the swings, though she felt ridiculous in her business casual slacks and blouse. Caleb bought them all ice cream from a truck that circled the park, and Rianne discovered that she genuinely enjoyed mint chocolate chip, something she hadn't eaten since she was Ethan's age. They talked about small things. Ethan's upcoming school project on ocean animals, Caleb's plans to repaint their apartment bathroom, Rianne's confession that she'd bought 3 novels last week and had actually started reading one. Nothing about quarterly earnings, or system uptime, or any of the things that usually consumed her thoughts. As the sun started to lower, Ethan yawned hugely, the sugar crash hitting. Caleb checked his watch. "We should head home. I've got dinner to make and homework to supervise." "Can Rianne come?" Ethan asked suddenly. Caleb looked uncomfortable. "Ethan, Miss Vaughn is busy." "Actually," Rianne heard herself say, "I'm not. If the invitation is genuine, I'd like to come." Caleb studied her face, searching for something. "It's just spaghetti, nothing fancy. I can't remember the last time I had home-cooked anything. Fancy is overrated." So she followed them home, her Porsche trailing Caleb's repaired Honda through neighborhood streets she'd never driven before, to an apartment building she'd visited once at 4 in the morning in crisis mode. But this time felt different. This time, she wasn't coming as a desperate CEO. She was coming as something she hadn't been in years. A guest. A friend, maybe. The apartment was small, but unmistakably lived in. Drawings covered the refrigerator. Books were stacked on every available surface. A narrow galley kitchen opened to a living room, where a couch showed its wear, and a small TV played muted cartoons. It was nothing like her minimalist penthouse, and somehow it felt more like a home than anywhere she'd lived in a decade. Caleb moved through the space with practiced efficiency, boiling water, browning beef, directing Ethan to wash his hands and set the table. Rianne felt useless until Caleb handed her a cutting board and tomatoes. "Think you can handle salad duty? I can try." They worked in comfortable proximity, the kitchen barely big enough for 2 adults but managing somehow. Ethan did his homework at the small dining table, occasionally asking questions about spelling or math. The radio played softly, some classic rock station, and the apartment filled with the smell of garlic and oregano. This, Rianne thought, was what she'd been missing. Not the specific activities, but the rhythm of it. The casual intimacy of people existing together without performance or pretense. Just the quiet hum of daily life. Dinner was served on mismatched plates at a table meant for 2, but accommodating 3 with creative chair placement. Ethan dominated the conversation, telling elaborate stories about school, his friends, and the elaborate fantasy world he was creating in his drawings. Caleb interjected occasionally to fact-check the wilder claims, but mostly he just listened, his face soft with love. Rianne found herself relaxing in a way she didn't know she needed, her shoulders dropping from their perpetual tension, her mind quiet of the constant calculations that usually ran in the background. She was just here, present, part of something ordinary, and therefore extraordinary. After dinner, while Caleb washed dishes and Rianne dried, Ethan brought out a board game, a simple thing involving cards and counting. They played 3 rounds at the coffee table, Ethan winning 2 of them and celebrating with unrestrained joy. At 8, Caleb announced bedtime. Ethan protested, but only half-heartedly, clearly exhausted. He hugged his father, then surprised Rianne by hugging her too. "Thanks for coming," he said into her shoulder. "Dad smiles more when you're here." He disappeared into his bedroom before she could respond, leaving Rianne and Caleb alone in the suddenly quiet apartment. "Sorry about that," Caleb said. "He's observant, too observant sometimes." "Is it true?" Rianne asked. "Do you smile more?" Caleb was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, having you around. It reminds me that there's more to life than just surviving, that I'm allowed to enjoy things." "I feel the same way," she admitted. "Being here tonight, with you and Ethan, I felt more like myself than I have in years. More like the person I was supposed to become before I got so lost in the becoming." They stood facing each other in the small living room, the space between them charged with something unspoken. Not quite attraction, not yet, but something deeper. Recognition, understanding, the beginning of something neither of them had been looking for but both desperately needed. "Thank you for letting me in," Rianne said softly. "Into this, your life, your home. I know I didn't earn it." "Maybe not at first," Caleb said. "But you're earning it now. Every day you choose to be different, you're earning it." She left shortly after, driving home through city streets that felt less lonely than usual, her penthouse less empty when she arrived. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Rianne went to sleep, feeling like she was building towards something real, something that mattered beyond profit margins and market share, something that felt dangerously close to happiness. The photograph appeared on the business news site TechPulse at 7:32 on a Thursday morning, 3 days after Rianne's dinner at Caleb's apartment. It was grainy, clearly taken from a distance with a telephoto lens, but the subjects were unmistakable. Rianne Vaughn, CEO of Apex Dynamics, sitting on a park bench next to her company janitor, both of them laughing while a small boy played on nearby swings. The headline read, "Apex CEO's Secret Friendship, Corporate Crisis, or Personal Connection." Rianne was in her morning meeting with the executive team when Monica burst in, her face pale, tablet extended. "You need to see this. Now." The article was a masterpiece of innuendo disguised as journalism. It detailed the data center crisis 3 weeks prior, Caleb's critical role in saving the company, and then speculated wildly about the nature of their relationship. Words like inappropriate, conflict of interest, and favoritism appeared frequently. The writer questioned whether Rianne's recent policy changes were sound business decisions or personal favoritism toward an employee she'd become close to. But the worst part came at the end. A quote from an anonymous board member suggesting that Rianne's judgment had become compromised by personal entanglements, and that perhaps it was time to reevaluate her leadership capacity. "Graham," whistled Lowe. "This is bad. This is a hit piece," Rianne said, her voice tight. "Someone leaked this deliberately." "The question is who," Todd said. "And why now?" The answer came an hour later when her lawyer called. "Rianne, we have a problem. Sterling Consolidated just filed a lawsuit claiming tortious interference. They're arguing that your cancellation of their partnership 3 months ago was motivated by personal bias rather than legitimate business concerns, and they're using your relationship with Caleb Turner as evidence of impaired judgment." Rianne's blood went cold. "That's absurd. The partnership was canceled because their CEO publicly humiliated an employee. I know that. You know that. But they're painting a narrative where you've been emotionally unstable since that incident, making rash decisions based on personal feelings rather than business logic. And now with these photos, with the changes you've made to company policy that directly benefit Turner, they have ammunition." By noon, the story had spread across every major business news outlet. By 2, Her phone was ringing constantly with calls from concerned investors. By 4, 3 board members had requested an emergency meeting to discuss her recent erratic behavior. Rianne sat in her office, watching her carefully constructed world fracture in real time, and realized with crystal clarity who was behind this. The same board members who'd sided with maintaining the sterling partnership, who'd argued that principals were expensive luxuries a growing company couldn't afford. They'd been waiting for an opening, and she'd given them one. Her phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. Just saw the news. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. She called him immediately. This is absolutely not your fault. Don't you dare take responsibility for someone else's malice. Rianne, I'm a janitor. You're a CEO. People are going to think exactly what that article suggests, that I'm taking advantage somehow, that you're compromised. Maybe it's better if we stop. Stop what? Being friends? Having dinner? Existing in the same orbit? Her voice was sharper than she intended. I refuse to let whoever's orchestrating this manipulation win by doing exactly what they want. But your company. My company will survive or it won't based on my leadership, not on who I spend my personal time with. The moment I let them dictate my life outside work is the moment I lose everything that matters. There was a long silence. Then Caleb said quietly, "You're sure about this? Because it's going to get worse before it gets better. I've seen how these things go. The media will dig into my past, my finances. They'll probably interview my neighbors and Ethan's teachers. It's going to be invasive and ugly. I know, and I'm telling you right now, I'm not backing down. The question is, can you handle it? Because I won't blame you if you can't. You and Ethan didn't sign up for this." Another pause. "Let me think about it. Not because I want to run, but because I have to consider what's best for my son. Of course. Call me when you've decided." They hung up. And Rianne stared out at the city skyline, at all those glittering towers built on ambition and compromise, and wondered if she was about to lose everything for the sake of something as simple as friendship. The answer came not from Caleb, but from her mother. Claire Vaughn appeared in Rianne's office at 6 that evening, unannounced, carrying a leather folder and wearing the expression that had terrified corporate lawyers back when she'd helped build the original company. "Mom, what are you doing here? Saving you from yourself." Claire set the folder on the desk. "Inside, you'll find documented evidence that 3 of your board members have been in talks with Sterling Consolidated about a potential buyout. They've been planning this for months, waiting for the right moment to undermine your leadership and force a sale. This article, this lawsuit, it's all orchestrated." Rianne opened the folder, her eyes scanning the documents, emails, financial projections, term sheets. "How did you get this? I still have friends in this industry, and not all of them are sharks. When I heard about the article this morning, I made some calls." Claire sat down across from her daughter. "They're using your friendship with Caleb as a weapon, because it's the most emotionally charged angle they could find. It has nothing to do with your competence, and everything to do with creating enough chaos to justify removing you. So what do? You fight, but not alone." Her mother pulled out her phone and made a call. "Graham, it's Claire Vaughn. Get the loyal board members together. The ones who actually give a damn about this company's mission." Rianne's office. 1 hour. She hung up and looked at her daughter. "You're going to need allies, real ones, and you're going to need to decide right now what you're willing to sacrifice to win this fight." "I'm not sacrificing, Caleb. I didn't think you would. Your father didn't raise a coward, and neither did I." Claire stood, gathering her things. "But understand something. If you stand by him publicly, you're making a statement about who you are and what you value. There's no walking that back. You'll lose some people. Some investors will pull out. Some clients might leave. Are you prepared for that?" Rianne thought about Ethan's drawing of a house with a yard and a dog, about Caleb teaching her to swing higher, about home-cooked spaghetti and mismatched plates and the way it felt to be part of something that mattered beyond market capitalization. "Yeah," she said. "I'm prepared." The emergency board meeting convened at 7. Of the 12 board members, 7 attended. 5 conspicuously absent, the same 5 Claire had identified as being involved in the Sterling buyout scheme. Rianne stood at the head of the table, her mother beside her, and laid out everything. The orchestrated attack, the buyout negotiations, the deliberate timing, designed to destabilize her leadership. "So here's what's going to happen," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "We're going to call their bluff. I'm holding a press conference tomorrow morning. I'm going to address the lawsuit, the article, and my friendship with Caleb Turner directly. I'm going to be transparent about the policy changes and why they were made. And I'm going to make it very clear that Apex Dynamics stands for treating people with dignity, whether that's profitable or not." Graham leaned forward. "That's a huge risk. Living is a risk. Building something meaningful is a risk. Playing it safe got my father killed, and I won't make the same mistake." She looked around the table at faces she'd worked alongside for years. "I need to know right now, are you with me? Because if you're not, I understand. But I'm doing this regardless." One by one, the 7 board members present voiced their support. It wasn't unanimous, and it wasn't guaranteed to be enough, but it was something. As the meeting ended and people filed out, Rianne's phone buzzed with a text from Caleb. "Ethan and I talked. He asked me if you were a good person. I said yes. He said then we should help you. Whatever you need, we're in." Rianne read the message 3 times, something warm and painful expanding in her chest. She'd spent 15 years believing that strength meant standing alone, that vulnerability was weakness, that needing people was a liability. Caleb Turner and his 6-year-old son had just proven her wrong about everything. Tomorrow she would face the cameras and the critics and the carefully constructed narrative designed to destroy her. But tonight, she called Caleb back and said simply, "Thank you for everything." "We're friends," he replied. "That's what friends do." And for the first time since the article broke, Rianne smiled. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the main conference room of Apex Dynamics, but by 8:30, the lobby was already packed with reporters, cameras, and that particular electricity that preceded either a disaster or a triumph. Rianne stood in her office, watching the gathering crowd on the security monitors, wearing a simple navy suit and the silver bracelet her father had given her mother on their 10th anniversary. No armor today, just herself and the truth. Monica appeared in the doorway. "Your mother's here." And Caleb just arrived with Ethan. "Ethan's here." Rianne's heart clenched. "Why would he bring Ethan?" he said. And I'm quoting, "If we're doing this, we're doing it as a family." I put them in the small conference room. Rianne found them there. Caleb in pressed khakis and a button-down shirt that was probably the nicest thing he owned. Ethan wearing a bow tie that was slightly crooked and clutching a folder of drawings. "You didn't have to come," Rianne said. "Yes, I did." Caleb straightened Ethan's bow tie. "You're not facing this alone. We talked about it last night, all the things people might say, how cameras can be scary." Ethan insisted. "I brought pictures," Ethan announced, opening his folder. "In case they need to see proof that you're nice. I drew this one of you pushing me on the swing, and this one of us eating spaghetti, and this one." "Buddy," Caleb interrupted gently, "I don't think they need proof quite like that. But Dad, you said good people help their friends when things are hard. Rianne's our friend. So we help." The simple logic of a 6-year-old, cutting through all the complexity to the truth underneath. Rianne knelt in front of him. "Thank you, Ethan. You're one of the bravest people I know." "My mom was brave," he said seriously. "Dad says she was scared of getting sick, but she was brave anyway. So I can be brave too." Rianne looked up at Caleb, who had that expression parents get when their hearts are breaking and swelling simultaneously. "Your mom would be very proud of you," she said. At 9:45, they gathered in the hallway outside the conference room. Rianne's mother appeared, impeccably dressed, radiating the kind of quiet power that came from surviving decades in a cutthroat industry. She took one look at the three of them and nodded approvingly. "Good, you look like real people, not corporate robots. That's what they need to see." She fixed Rianne with a stern look. "Remember, you're not apologizing. You're explaining. There's a difference." "I know, Mom. And if anyone asks inappropriate questions about your personal life, you shut them down immediately. You're a CEO, not a reality show contestant." Graham appeared with final updates. "The board members opposing you sent a statement to the press. They're calling for your resignation, claiming you've lost objectivity. Sterling's lawyer is in the third row, probably hoping you'll say something he can use in the lawsuit." "Good," Rianne said. "Let them watch." At precisely 10 a.m., they walked in. The camera flashes were blinding, the noise level overwhelming. Rianne took her place behind the podium, Caleb and Ethan standing slightly behind her, and to the left, Claire Vaughn, to her right, and Graham beside her. A united front. She waited for the noise to settle, then spoke clearly into the microphone. "Good morning. My name is Rianne Vaughn, and I'm the CEO and founder of Apex Dynamics. I've called this press conference to address the recent articles, allegations, and speculation about my leadership and my personal relationships. I'm going to be completely transparent because I believe this company was built on honesty, and I won't compromise that now." She took a breath. 3 weeks ago, our company experienced a catastrophic system failure. For those unfamiliar with our business, this represented an existential threat. 42 client companies lost access to their data. We were looking at millions in damages and the very real possibility of complete failure. The room was silent, every recorder raised, every camera focused. The crisis was resolved by Caleb Turner, a member of our maintenance staff, who had institutional knowledge that proved critical to our recovery. Without his help, freely given, in the middle of the night, Apex Dynamics would not exist today. She gestured to Caleb, who stood straight despite clearly wanting to disappear. "Mr. Turner is also my friend. Over the past few weeks, I've had the privilege of getting to know him and his son Ethan. I've had dinner in their home. I've spent time with them outside of work. And yes, this friendship influenced my recent decisions regarding company policy." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Rianne pressed on. "It influenced me to look at our wage structures and realize we hadn't given raises to essential staff in 3 years despite record growth. It influenced me to examine our parking policies and recognize they were elitist and served no practical purpose. It influenced me to walk through our building and actually see the people who keep it running, people whose names I should have known years ago." She leaned forward slightly. "If that's compromised judgment, then I'm guilty. If treating employees with dignity regardless of their position is a fireable offense, then fire me. Because I will not lead a company that values profit over people. I won't become the kind of leader who my own father spent his life working for. People who saw employees as resources to extract rather than human beings, deserving of respect." A reporter called out, "What about the Sterling lawsuit? They claim your decision to cancel their partnership was emotionally motivated." "It was," Rianne said flatly. "I was emotionally motivated by disgust. Their CEO publicly humiliated an employee, a veteran and single father, for driving a car that didn't meet his aesthetic standards. I watched him mock a man in front of 200 people for the crime of being working class. And I decided in that moment that I would not attach my company's name to his. If that's tortious interference, then let the courts decide. But I'll make that choice again every single time." Another reporter, "Some board members suggest you're unfit to lead. How do you respond?" "I respond by pointing out that the board members in question have been in secret negotiations to sell this company to Sterling Consolidated for months. They're not concerned about my fitness to lead. They're concerned that my values are getting in the way of their profit margins." She pulled out copies of the documents her mother had provided. I have documented evidence of these negotiations, which I'm happy to provide to any journalist interested in the full story. The room erupted. Reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, the sterling lawyer looking furious in the third row. Rianne raised her hand for quiet. One more thing. I've been asked repeatedly about the nature of my relationship with Caleb Turner, as if friendship between people of different economic classes is somehow scandalous. So let me be absolutely clear. Caleb is my friend. He's taught me more about leadership in 3 weeks than I learned in 15 years of running this company. His son Ethan has shown me what real courage looks like, and if the price of their friendship is this job, then I'll pay it gladly. Because I've finally learned something my father knew, but I forgot. The measure of success isn't what you accumulate, it's what you stand for when standing costs you everything. She stepped back from the podium. I'm not taking questions about my personal life, but I'll answer anything about company operations or policy changes. Your choice. The questions came rapid fire. About the wage increases, the policy changes, the financial projections for next quarter. Rianne answered them all with the same calm confidence, Graham occasionally interjecting with technical details. Then a voice from the back. Mr. Turner, what do you say to people who claim you're taking advantage of Miss Vaughn's position? Every camera swung to Caleb. Rianne started to step in, but he touched her arm lightly, silently asking for space. He moved to the microphone, clearly uncomfortable, but determined. I say those people don't know what they're talking about. I didn't ask for Miss Vaughn's friendship. I didn't seek her out or try to gain advantage. I just did my job and tried to be a decent human being. The fact that a CEO and a janitor becoming friends seems impossible to people. That's the real problem. Not me. Not her. But a system that says we're supposed to stay in our separate boxes and never connect as equals. His voice grew stronger. My wife used to say that kindness costs nothing but means everything. Miss Vaughn showed my son kindness. She showed me respect when she didn't have to. She admitted she was wrong and tried to make it right. If that makes her unfit to lead, then I don't want to live in a world where the fit leaders are the ones who can't admit mistakes or see people as people. He stepped back, and Ethan suddenly darted forward, holding up one of his drawings. This is Rianne pushing me on the swing, he announced to the room full of reporters. She's nice, and she makes my dad smile. That's all you need to know. For a moment, the entire room froze. Then, from somewhere in the middle of the press corps, someone started clapping, then another, then more, until half the room was applauding. A 6-year-old's impassioned defense of his friend. Rianne felt tears prick her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Not yet. Instead, she returned to the microphone. Thank you all for coming. I look forward to proving over the coming months that Apex Dynamics can be both profitable and principled. And to the board members calling for my resignation, you're welcome to try, but I'm not going anywhere. She walked off the platform, Caleb and Ethan following, her mother bringing up the rear like a protective guard. Behind them, the reporters erupted into chaos, everyone shouting questions, but they didn't stop. In the hallway, away from the cameras, Rianne finally let out the breath she'd been holding. Caleb was shaking slightly, adrenaline clearly catching up with him. I can't believe I just did that, he said. I can't believe Ethan just did that. I can't believe any of us did that. Rianne replied. But we did. Together. Claire Vaughn pulled her daughter into a rare hug. Your father would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. Whatever happened next, whether the board vote went her way, or the lawsuit destroyed her, or the company survived or collapsed, Rianne knew one thing with absolute certainty. She'd finally become the person she was meant to be, and it had taken a janitor with a rusty car and his 6-year-old son to show her the way. 6 months later, Rianne stood in an unfamiliar place, the parking lot of Brookstone Elementary, waiting for the afternoon bell to ring. The board vote had gone her way, 7-5, though the 5 dissenting members had resigned immediately after. The Sterling lawsuit had been dismissed when their own internal emails revealed the CEO's pattern of workplace harassment, turning their case into a liability rather than an asset. 3 major clients had left Apex Dynamics in the aftermath of the press conference, but 7 new ones had signed on, specifically citing the company's values-driven approach. The business publications that had questioned her judgment now ran features about her leadership model. TechPulse, the same outlet that had published the hit piece, issued a formal apology and a follow-up story titled, "The CEO Who Chose People Over Profit and Won." But none of that mattered as much as what was happening today. The school doors opened, and kids poured out in their usual chaotic rush. Ethan spotted her immediately and came running, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. "Rianne, you came. Dad said you might be too busy." "I promised, didn't I?" She knelt to his level. "Ready for the big surprise?" His eyes went wide. "It's today? Really today? Really today? Your dad's meeting us there." They drove across town in Rianne's car, Ethan bouncing in the back seat with barely contained excitement. When they pulled up to the address, Caleb was already there, leaning against his Honda, which now sported a fresh paint job courtesy of Apex's expanded employee assistance program. "Did you tell him?" Caleb asked. "Not yet. I wanted us to do it together." They walked Ethan to the chain-link fence surrounding a small house in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't grand, just a modest 2-bedroom with a front yard and a large oak tree perfect for a swing. But to Ethan, staring through that fence with his mouth open, it might as well have been a palace. "Is this?" he whispered. "It's ours," Caleb said, his voice thick. "Rianne helped me with the down payment through the company's homeownership assistance program she started. We close next week." Ethan turned to Rianne, tears streaming down his face. "We get the yard, and the tree, and we can get a dog." "All of it," Rianne confirmed. "Every single bit of your drawing." He launched himself at her, wrapping his arms around her waist and sobbing with the kind of joy that only someone who dreamed impossible dreams could understand. Caleb joined them, creating a circle of 3, and for a long moment, they just stood there, letting the weight of it settle. This wasn't charity. It was investment in the people who made the company work, a program that would help dozens of employees achieve homeownership over the coming years. But it started here, with a janitor who'd saved her company and a boy who'd saved her soul. Later, after they'd walked the property, and Ethan had picked out exactly where his bedroom window would face, after they'd measured the tree for swing placement and discussed fence options for the future dog, Rianne and Caleb stood alone on the front porch while Ethan explored the backyard. "Thank you," Caleb said quietly, "for all of this, for seeing us." "Thank you for teaching me how to see," Rianne replied. "I had everything and nothing before I met you. Now I have something that actually matters. Friendship? Family," she corrected. "The kind you choose. The kind that chooses you back." Ethan's laughter carried from the backyard, pure and bright, the sound of a boy who finally had room to grow. In the distance, the city skyline rose against the afternoon sky, all those towers of glass and steel representing ambition and achievement. But here, in this modest yard with this makeshift family, Rianne had found something better than success. She'd found purpose. She'd found connection. She'd found the answer to the question she'd been too afraid to ask. What comes after you've won everything? The answer was simple. You start building something that can't be measured in dollars or market share. You build relationships. You build community. You build a life worth living, not just a career worth celebrating. "Ready to head back?" Caleb asked. Rianne looked at the house, at Ethan playing in the yard that would soon be his, at the future taking shape in real time. "Actually, I think I'd like to stay a little longer, if that's okay." "It's more than okay," Caleb smiled. "Stay as long as you want. You're always welcome here." And for the first time in her adult life, Rianne understood what home really meant. Not a place, but the people who made space for you in their world, who saw you at your worst and chose to stand beside you anyway, who taught you that the distance between a penthouse and a small apartment between a CEO and a janitor, between who you are and who you could be, was nothing more than the willingness to cross it. She'd made that crossing, and she'd never go back. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.